Welcome back into the Talkin Dynasty podcast. I am your host, Garrett Price, here with my very good-looking co-host, Jared Wackerly. Jared, how's it going, buddy?
Why you guys always comment on my looks, man? It like makes me. I mean, I appreciate it, but it's like I don't know. It's weird.
Look good, feel good, play good.
Yeah, man. But I don't feel good lately, dude. I ever since I got back from vacation, I haven't been working out. I'm like eating kind of like shit, so I gotta get back in the groove of things. And football season is the hardest time of the year to get back in the workout groove for me because it's like I'm so focused on all of this.
Right. Oh, dude. Beginning of the year, my New Year's resolution till vacation in, what was it, May? Crushed it.
Yeah.
And then once vacation hit, then it went from vacation into summer, into like busy season for me. And I'm a guy that like when I get stressed, it's like, give me the Mountain Dew, give me the crappy foods, give me the like all that kind of stuff. So I'm 100% in the same boat right now. I'm with you. So hopefully I can still squeeze into that Tajay Spears shirt. We'll see.
My thing's like, it's like how busy I am. So I'm all about like efficiency and like, what can I eat to quickly just resolve this hunger so I can just get back to what I need to do? And like, do I have time to work out right now? I can always make time. I'm making excuses, but it's like,
for sure.
I always got something else that I'm putting a higher priority on. So, but,
absolutely. I'm not sure that people follow us for our health tips, though, fortunately, since we're not crushing that right now. They follow us because they want to know strategy. How do I get the most out of my dynasty fantasy football teams? And that's what Talkin Dynasty is about. If you are new to the show, you're not too far behind. This is still a relatively new show. Feel free to go back and listen to our last few episodes that we had. Last one, was it the analytics episode?
Yep, we had David Zach on to go through start to finish how to use analytics within Dynasty Fantasy Football and fantasy football just in general.
Yeah, we've got some awesome other episodes coming up in the future that we've already started planning out. Some on injuries, some on trading, all kinds of stuff that we have planned for the future. And getting into the season, we'll have some different opportunities to be able to jump off of what's going on in the season and how do we capitalize on what happens in the news cycle, what happens on teams, and how we can capitalize on those things. But today, we are just literally at this point of recording, we are like 30 hours away, 37 hours. I don't know. What are we? Like 31.
37-ish.
30, 37. I don't know. What is it? Something like that. Just 24 hours and then plus 7. So yeah, like 31 hours away, roughly. We're really good at math.
Oh, that's way off. Jeez.
So we're getting dangerously close to the beginning of the season. And obviously we just have one game that it starts off with. So this year we're kicking off with the Detroit Lions, Kansas City Chiefs. Should be an awesome game. Then we get into the full slate on Sunday. We've got the Monday night stuff. Dude, I can't wait. I'm so freaking excited. I've already placed some bets. I'm ready to go, man.
I got I got 3-leg parlay going. I got some props. Got my season-long bets in. So same boat.
But we want to talk about, for our Dynasty Fantasy Football teams, what you should be doing last minute to make sure that you're prepared for the season. Because I think this is even in our prep for this, Jared, we talked about this. This is an underrated aspect of Dynasty, I think, because in Dynasty, we have such a long-term focus. You know, we love looking at rookies. We love looking at youth. We love looking at the long-term projections and, man, how good my team is going to be in 2 to 3 years once all of these picks hit and like all of this kind of stuff. We love the long-term outlook. But at the end of the day, this is still fantasy football. We still need to win games week to week, and we need to make sure we're maximizing all of the different tools, all of the different opportunities to make sure that we're maximizing our teams at kickoff. So we're going to dig into a few different topics on how we like to do that. And honestly, some of the things that we're still even learning in this process, because we fall into that same trap where we do so much prep all the way through from the second the Super Bowl's over, all the way through draft and all that kind of stuff. We're prepping all of it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, what does Sleeper say my best projection is? Yeah, let's just do that starting lineup. We're good. Like, what? Why do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't lie. Sometimes, I mean, so many damn leagues, I'm like, all right, yeah, this guy here. And I'm like, hold on, take a second. You want to win these leagues, dude. Like, now, and there's so many people now that are, I think there's more casual dynasty players, I would say, now than there are like diehards. So there's so many guys that are typically play redraft. I feel like that's the majority of people. Like the majority of people play redraft and they have a couple dynasty leagues. Now you and I are the opposite, but there's so many people now they've done their redraft drafts. They're kind of up to speed on this season. And now those casual guys are, more apt to do some trades. They're looking at their teams. So, we can kind of cater this to that listener too.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off with, look, there's a term, there's a company called Giant, and there's a term that they use. And I think about this just in like life in general, but they say, know yourself to lead yourself. And like, this is like, I don't want to get like very philosophical, but I feel like you need that same type of philosophy in your fantasy football leagues. Like, you need to know where your team is actually at, because I think often we deceive ourselves. We think we know where our team is at, but do we actually? Because look, I can draft a bunch of guys that I like, and that means my team is really good because I like these guys. That doesn't necessarily mean your team is actually good. That doesn't necessarily mean your team is actually going to win. It's full of players you like and you project fairly high, but how does that really truly stack up with the rest of your league? So, Jared, let's get into that a little bit. Identifying where you're at as far as being more of a contending team, more of a middle of the road team, or more of a rebuild team, and what those actually mean and what they look like in actuality.
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, you probably should have been doing this throughout the entire offseason, is just trying to evaluate your team. Where do I stand currently in my league to help guide your decision making? Because as Rich Dotson always says on the Dynasty Nerds podcast, the worst place to be is in the middle. Yeah. You either want to be contending or you want to be tearing it down, going into a rebuild. And especially with this really good quarterback class coming in next year, you want to make sure your team's positioned to get that top pick. And that starts at week 1 through 3. And that's just as important for contenders. So you need to be using, and us at Dynasty Nerds, like, we provide you guys with one of the best tools in the market to help guide you in figuring out if you're a contender or if you're in a rebuild or if you're in the middle. We have the Dynasty GM, and you can access that through a Nerd Herd membership, Dynasty GM membership on our website. And you can plug in your sleeper team, your MFL team, FFPC, all of those other apps are coming later. But anyway, you can sync your team up. We'll provide a full view on your league and where you stand, and that can kind of guide you now into deciding who to trade for, who to buy, who to sell, and what you need to be doing.
And even being in the middle can sometimes be harder to identify than people realize, because you could look at your team and you could say, even according to the Dynasty GM, I am a top 3 team in this league. Okay. But when you look at the difference between your team and the 2 teams ahead of you, and we give you like point values on there, so you can look in contender mode, like, am I 1,000 points away? Am I 15,000 points away? Because you could be in 3rd place, but the difference between being 1,000 points away and 15,000 points away is huge. Now, if you're not on the Dynasty GM, you're like, I don't know what those points of value mean. That's fine. But realistically, how you could be the 3rd best team, but how close are you actually to those top 2 teams? Are you like within, like, I could reach out and touch them, or man, we're like a Grand Canyon apart. So the chance of me actually being able to contend with these teams, actually being able to beat these teams, is pretty dang low. And on the flip side, sometimes you find yourself in the middle, but it's simply because you're on the come up. So just because you are in the middle doesn't mean like, oh shoot, now I'm in the middle, I got to blow it up again. No, you're in the middle because you have a bunch of young assets that haven't fully matured into being in their prime yet. So you have, Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. He's not at Mahomes and Josh Allen level yet, but many are projecting that he could potentially get to that spot. I currently have, these wide receivers. Yeah, Jackson Smith and Jigba might put you in the middle, but we're expecting him to do better long term. So it's looking at your team like, where am I actually at? The true middle teams, in my opinion, and Jared, you can tell me what your thoughts are on this. The true, like, actually stuck in the middle teams are the teams that think they're contenders, but they're actually not. So I've given my first this year and first next year, and yet I'm somehow still projected to be in fourth place with guys like Mike Evans and DeAndre Hopkins and Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. Well, you're going to be stuck in the middle for a while now because you just gave up your future assets, but you also have a team that might not be able to compete this year and isn't going to be lasting very long because of how old they are. I think that's the true definition of, like, you're stuck in the middle and you can't get out of it now because you try to trade to get your picks back. They know what you're doing. They're going to jack up the price infinitely.
Those are the suckers, dude. Like, those are the guys I'm targeting to try and get their draft picks.
Yeah.
Because they're one injury away from being a top 3 pick, maybe. And this is even something else to be looking at is, like, maybe there's a team that is set up to be like top 3 in competing this year in your dynasty league, but this year's it. Like, they're old. They're very old. So I'm targeting like their 2025 picks, their 2026 picks, because they're aging out and they don't have many young assets. They've been going for it. I'm trying to get those draft picks now because those future firsts, 2026 first, dude, super cheap right now. Yeah. They're cheapest they'll ever be, obviously, farther they're out. So that's another little tidbit to look at, look at your teams and evaluate your competition that way.
Yeah. So coming into the season, so we kind of touched a lot on the middle. What does it mean to really be contending? We talked about being one of those top teams, high above everybody else, but that doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it's a team that, man, you just did a fantastic job building. You're going to be a contender for a while, but sometimes it's just, man, I'm so close. I have a stacked wide receiver room. I've got Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. I've got Travis Kelce when healthy at tight end. Like, I've got everything, and I got Derrick Henry, but gosh darn it, Jonathan Taylor's gone. And my third running back is solid in James Conner, but I need one more running back to feel solid. That's where you can make those maybe not super exciting moves for like a, Bijan or a Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
But you're making the moves to get Aaron Jones. You're making a move to get
Joe Mixon.
Jerick McKinnon. Even, if you want to pay even like a third to get a Jerick McKinnon.
Alexander Madison, throw second or two seconds out there and get Madison. I feel like he's got a 1 to 2 year shelf life, but still kind of young. Might need to pay a little more. No, I'm with you completely, Garrett. I think for me, like, as long as I feel like I'm in that top 4, I feel like I have a good chance. And obviously when you get into playoffs, you said it earlier, like, it's a crapshoot, man. Like, we've seen so many guys flame out, so many guys, and a lot of it has to do with like the schedule at that time of year. And by that point, we kind of have an idea of which teams are which and who can do what. So targeting players with really good playoff schedules is important too. But as a contender, I think another little side note or trail we can go on, Garrett, is like having assets to make those moves during the year. That's why it's so important to be flipping these guys that kind of rise up during the preseason or have good preseasons for thirds, seconds, and constantly be churning your roster that way when like news hits, so that you have those assets in your pocket as a contender to where you can buy a backup running back because one of the starters got hurt on their teams, and you can use them for a few weeks to get a few wins. That's another really important strategy that I like to implement. I assume you do the same.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it can be tough sometimes because you fall in love with that player and you're like, oh, but I drafted them so cheap and they're performing well. But a lot of times, especially if they're those lower draft capital guys, more often than not, and you're going to miss on a few of them and you're going to trade them too early and you could have got more. That is going to happen. But more often than not, it's best to flip them, get a profit, and then build up all that profit that you've gotten to get a more steady, more reliable asset down the road. So I'm 100% with you.
I keep going on tangents, going off topic.
We're just talking Dynasty. That's the name of the show, baby.
I know. This is what I do too. I'm just like, what were we talking about again?
Where were we at? All right. So we've touched on middle of the pack contender. What about rebuild? Like if you're looking at your team right now and you're going into the season, you're like, I'm not going to win a lot of games this year. Like, what is your thought process going into the season then?
I mean, call it what you want, but you want to tank. Like, you don't want to tank to where it's like detrimental to your league and against the rules, whatever you guys lay out. Like, you want to do it the right way. You can't just not set a lineup or, plug in your worst guys in your lineup, but that's not the right way to do it. You need a roster tank. So you need to be trading away the assets that are going to be putting you in a position to win games. Like right now, this is me in a rebuild in one of my leagues currently. I have Cooper Kupp, and I've been trying to get rid of him this whole offseason. Never really felt like I was getting the fair price. It's a home league, so a lot of the guys aren't really tapped in like I am. So I wasn't able to really get back what I felt I deserved. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to hold on until the time's right. And now he's injured. Yeah. So, but now he's just going to sit on my bench because he's not going to be scoring for me. Right. And I know when he is healthy and when it's time mid fantasy season that he's coming back like that, there's going to be a huge spike up in his price for me as in a rebuild situation. So I am going to be able to get the value back that I feel I deserve on an asset like that. So just understanding that you need to put yourself in the best position to come away with the best first round pick you can next year to get Caleb Williams or Drake May or Marvin Harrison Jr. Like that's so important to your rebuild. So that's a strategy in itself. People may hate on it, but roster tanking is completely fine with me. What are your thoughts on that whole conversation?
100%. Because I hate true tanking. Like I hate oh, this guy's injured, but I left him in my lineup.
Yeah, we don't.
He's on a bye week. Like that's bullcrap. Don't do that. Yeah. But there are very intentional ways to do it that are still very much so within the rules. So on the kind of flip side of that, I'm looking at who are some younger players that are injured right now. Maybe a Jonathan Taylor, maybe a Kyler Murray, lowest that their price is ever been. And they're not going to help me much right now because they're missing a lot of time. So, can I trade right now? On the flip side, if I'm a rebuild team, I'm going to be looking at like Aaron Jones and say like, how much plus Aaron Jones does it take for me to get Jonathan Taylor? Because that team needs a running back their first 4 weeks, or maybe even more for Jonathan Taylor. We don't know. Kyler Murray, his value is like crazy depressed. And I don't want to get like too deep into trading because we are going to have like a trading episode, but like those are the things that you're looking at. But then also at the end of the day, picks don't score points. So if you have picks, they're not going to score you any points. That's the easiest way to tank is just collecting draft capital.
No, for sure. And this, what I'm about to bring up now is like, this goes to contenders and people in a rebuild. Like, dude, look at your first 3 matchups in the fantasy season. How do those look? Are you playing some duds, guys that are rebuilding? As a contender, you're going to get off to a 3-0 start, most likely. Well, then that's great. I feel like you don't really want to make any moves if you don't have to, at this point in the season, because there's so much that's going to happen in the next few weeks that are unexpected that nobody really thought was going to happen. Injuries come up, players break out, players are duds. In the first few weeks, there's going to be so many people overreacting to news and what's happening. So I think it's important to look at your matchups, figure out, what's probably going to happen for you. Maybe don't make a move now if you feel like you're going to get off to that 3-0 start, kind of get a view on everything, and then, keep looking at it as you continue to go. If you feel like you really need to get this win, then maybe make a move at that point. And then vice versa for people in a rebuild, look at those matchups, hopefully you're going to get a loss. If it is going to be a tight one, is there a guy that just broke out the past week that you might be able to flip for a third? Things like that. You just need to be constantly paying attention to like who's producing on your team and what's coming up ahead as far as your matchups go.
Well, you brought up producing early, and when in doubt, there's going to be a Sammy Watkins performance week 1. Like there's going to be guys that kind of out of nowhere have big weeks. Now we touched on it in the sense of low round guys that we don't necessarily think hold long-term value, trying to flip those guys quickly for, seconds, thirds, things like that. But how quickly into the season do you react to guys underperforming that we expected to perform well, or guys that we might not have seen coming that blow up earlier than we expected? Like, because there's a delicate balance of you want to be the first one there, but you also don't want to be the first one there because you overreacted and bought or sold a player that you shouldn't have. So it's like you want to be the first one there in Dynasty because you don't want to miss out. But if you're too early to the game, then you just screwed yourself over. So like, how do you deal with that balance? Because it's a tough one.
I mean, I remember last year on the Dynasty Nerds podcast, I think I was one that I was like talking on. I think Matt was out sick or something, but we started talking about how we'd trade CeeDee Lamb straight up for Michael Pittman.
Yeah, that was a mistake. That was a mistake.
I mean, that's just the emotional part of playing fantasy football and being a human being. Like, we're going to react emotionally. So it's important to like keep your grounding on.
Fortunately, I didn't actually do that.
Me neither.
Yeah, but.
And I think I offered it to Rambo, who used to cut our YouTube videos. And I forget what it didn't do it, but I wish I would have or something. I can't remember the exact deal. But anyway, I think it's important to like look at the tape. What was the opportunity or usage of those players within their offense? Was it one catch for 70 yards on 3 targets, or stuff like that?
Right.
You got to get a good feel for like the actual usage of that player. And Deion Jackson, are you flipping him now because he's going to have that opportunity spike? But Jonathan Taylor's coming back, maybe. Who knows how that saga going to play out?
It's a weird one. No, I think you bring up a great point. I think usage is a really good indicator on players, especially ones that kind of came out of nowhere. We didn't see it coming. Like, how likely is this to be predictable? Is it a situation where it was just a big player or two, but the volume really wasn't there? Who didn't play that day? Versus
snap rates, target share.
Exactly. All of those types of things. Who were they playing against? Did it just so happen that they were playing against the worst secondary in the NFL in week 1? Or was it against a legit opponent? So you have to make sure that before you determine what you're doing with these players that break out early, that you actually do your due diligence in why they broke out, how that happened. Is it repeatable or not? So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and just falling back on what we were talking about earlier, like, do I actually need to overextend myself right now and make this move? Or am I likely going to win the next few matchups and I can kind of wait and see and in a few weeks from now, what's the landscape look like at that point? But buying guys early can also be a huge benefit, maybe you're buying them low. There's guys that get off to a rocky start in the first few weeks of the season that can open up buying windows for those players.
Look at Justin Fields last year. If you would have been proactive in buying Justin Fields, you would be giddy. Because
CeeDee Lamb, we just talked about. Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb, he had a tough start to the season, but Fields literally the first month, they didn't throw the ball. So that should have been predictable to us to say like, okay, yes, his games were bad, but they were terrible weather and they were not throwing the ball like I would expect them to. So I expect this usage to change, which should make him a value. So when you're processing through those types of things as to why a player is underperforming or overperforming, sometimes it is just they suck.
And those pass attempt numbers were kind of flawed because you got to look at the drop back rate. Like, he was dropping back to pass, but he was running a lot or getting sacked, and those aren't pass attempts. So you got to look at that too.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point that I hadn't even brought up. So good call on that. Something else that I like to do when preparing for week one, they are two very different things. But I think in some ways it's helpful to play a little bit of DFS when you're playing Dynasty. And the reason I say that is kind of going back to what we were talking about in the very beginning. Dynasty, we have such a long-term outlook that sometimes we miss the nuance of the week-to-week stuff. DFS is literally, it's daily fantasy sports. You're focused simply on that day or that weekend or, like a small window. And what do you do when you're preparing for those types of things? I'm looking at the weather coming up this weekend for the different games. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at, offensive coordinator changes. Like, how does that affect pass attempts versus rush attempts? How does that affect pace of play? Pace of play is a really underrated thing because, maybe your team passes 60% of the time, but they have one of the slowest paces of play. So they're still, even though 60% pass, their pass numbers are going to be very similar to the team that only throws it 54% of the time because they just don't run as many plays. So, like, looking into these specific things that you would more look into on a daily fantasy sports side can really help you make some of those early trade offers, but also those start-sit decisions. Like, right off the bat, are you starting David Njoku or Cole Kmet? Like, well, let's look at all of the numbers. Let's look at who they're playing. Let's look at, what safeties were there or not there before. Like, what, all of those types of things to help you make an informed decision as to why you will start this guy versus this guy. And you're not going to get it right all the time. But if we can just even take those 50-50 ones and turn those more into 65-35, even 60-40, like, we're very happy if we're continually making smart, educated decisions. We can't predict all of it. There are going to be things that happen that there was no way to know that was going to happen. But if we can be informed, we can more often than not make correct decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's so important in those, like, you brought up some good points, like in those 50-50 lineup decisions, like, they're so hard and there's so many of them, especially when you play in a bunch of different leagues. So it's like, what do you do? And one thing I do like to utilize is the odds makers. And betting's become so big, and those sports books are in the market of being correct, or else they're going to go out of business.
Lose a lot of money.
And it's crazy how accurate they are. Like, there's been so many times where I lose by that half point. And you're like, oh my God, I thought I was going to get the other night, dude.
Yes.
I had a 6-leg parlay. All right. I took Keon Coleman over receiving yards, hit that. Florida State money line, hit that.
Yep.
What else did I have in that game? I had something else and I hit that. I hit the Duke money line.
Yep.
I hit Antonio Williams over his receiving yards, and I had Riley Leonard over. I needed 29 pass yards for Riley Leonard in the second half of that Duke game. No, he only got me 29. I needed like 29. Yeah, I needed.
You needed like 40
or something.
Yeah.
Call that a lock. I'm like, $20 to win 2,000. Nope, didn't get it. So, like, it's crazy how accurate these sports books and these odds makers are. Like, utilize that to your advantage when you're trying to make these decisions. Like, what game has the highest over-under? What game has the lowest over-under? What's the spread in that game? So, just week one, Kansas City versus Detroit. That's the highest over-under this week. In Kansas City, the line's currently -5.5. So, Kansas City's favored to win. And utilizing that to figure out, like, okay, that's likely going to have the highest scoring output, most opportunity to have to score fantasy points for the players involved in that game. Looking at those type of things in those lineup decisions can be extremely helpful.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. So I think if we can start to approach our dynasty leagues more like DFS guys, more like redraft, I think we've got to get out of this like dynasty mode and put ourselves in a spot to be able to score points early and often. And look, this is even more critical in these lineups where you're starting a lot of people, because you have to scrape the bottom of the barrel a little bit more, especially like as we get into the season. We're kind of talking about week 1 right now, preparing right before the season. But like as the season goes on, you have to start like, man, I got to choose this week between Tyler Boyd and Darius Slayton. Like, like I don't want to have to choose between those guys. Yeah. But that's what it comes to because of injuries, because of bye weeks. Like that is going to happen. And instead of just like, well, I drafted Tyler Boyd higher, so I'm going to start Tyler Boyd. Like, no. Who are they playing this week? What's the weather looking like? What are the odds makers saying? What are like all of these things that DFS guys do? We should still be doing all of those same types of things simply for our dynasty teams. Now, there are times where it's obvious. It's like, okay, am I starting Joe Burrow or Kenny Pickett? Yeah, I'm starting Joe Burrow. Like that's yeah. I don't need to do all this homework to tell me to start Joe Burrow. Like we don't need to like waste all of our life and family time over stupid decisions. Like, but these tight ones, these close ones, we really do need to make sure we're doing our homework.
No, for sure. I'd love to have a DFS expert on to go through a lot of this because I'm learning. I'm learning to implement this into my process. I'm not an expert by any means on some of this, but I am well read, I like to think. So no, I'm totally with you. Looking at Dynasty, week to week from a DFS perspective is going to give you that edge. Looking at Dynasty in a redraft perspective for this year, I mean, that's just going to give you an edge because at the end of the day, it's all about winning, right? I'm trying to get the championship.
We're trying to get the ships. Exactly. Now, we're going to get to week 1. And first of all, it's going to be awesome because it's football and it's back. So like, even if you lose all of your games, it's still a good week because football's back. I really don't want to lose all my games.
Hey, I play you in, I think the NEO league, or maybe it's Talkin Dynasty.
I was going to say we're in like 8 leagues together. So I'm sure we're playing each other somewhere.
Yeah.
But after week 1, there's going to be a rush to the waiver wire. Now, in dynasty leagues, it's not as big as it is in redraft because dynasty leagues tend to be a little bit deeper. But the one last thing that I kind of want to highlight is, can I get a week ahead of the waiver wire? Can I be 1 week ahead where I'm not having to spend a ton of fab, or I'm not having to use my top waiver wire spot to get this guy? Like, can I project ahead looking at guys on my bench that I know I am not going to use anytime soon, and I don't think they're that great? Like, they're just marginally better than the guys on the waiver wire. Is there somebody here that I could give up and cash in somebody else that maybe might blow up, maybe might not? I don't know, but at least has the opportunity somewhere to potentially do something. So like, this one's a more obvious example, but like the Travis Kelce, Noah Gray thing, like Noah Gray, even in dynasty leagues, is on some waiver wires.
Yeah.
That's somebody that
ahead
of time, he shouldn't be, but ahead of time, like we're trying to look at like, what are the possibilities of Travis Kelce going down? Well, it didn't seem very likely at the time because Travis Kelce seems to be a freak of nature and just never sustains injuries. But if he does, how valuable is that backup going to be? Right. So let's look ahead at this coming week. What players are already a little dinged up, a little banged up, and who are their backups that if they go down, if they can't finish the game, whatever, that could all of a sudden pop into a role that might be available. So like one that I've been hearing some stuff about is knee lately, like Juju Smith-Schuster. Is the Patriots wide receiver room exciting? No, not exciting at all. But if there's somebody in there that maybe a Tyquan Thornton, maybe a Devontae Parker, maybe fill in the blank. But if Juju does have some knee issues and by week 1, week 2, week 3, he goes down, well, now all of a sudden this guy gets promoted and I can either A, utilize him during bye weeks or injuries or whatever, or B, do what we did in the very beginning and talked about, flip them quickly for just an extra third, just an extra second, that kind of stuff. So that's the last thing that I wanted to touch on is like, let's look at the potential waiver wire guys now. And can I get a week or two ahead of the waiver wire so I'm not blowing my fab? I'm not, and we're not going to get ahead of all of them. It's impossible to know, but just projecting out what could be.
And it all comes back to the topic of maximizing your roster spots.
Yeah.
Make sure all those taxi spots are full. You never know. Make sure they're all full. There's no reason not to
have it full. There's no reason.
If you can put someone on IR, put them on IR and fill that roster spot with someone else from the waiver wire, like Garrett was just talking about. Because who knows? Maybe you have Noah Gray right now. I'm selling him. If I have Noah Gray, I'm selling him immediately if you can. Because I wasn't too high on him as a prospect. He's a later round guy. I forget where he got drafted, but good athlete. He's popped a little bit, but I really don't think he's anything special. And it's a hyperextended knee. It's not nothing serious. Yeah. So, what do you think you could get for Noah Gray right now? A third?
Probably a third.
Yeah,
you could probably get a third for him.
That's probably the most you'd be able to get for him. But I would sell him for a third all day. Yeah,
especially in a tight end premium league, you're definitely getting a third. And I'm in a tight end premium.
So, like, this kind of leads me into like another thing here, but identify the person in your league that has Travis Kelce that might need to fill that spot. Like, pay attention throughout the year who loses guys to injuries that have a need in your league and approach them, to fill that need for them and try to take. I always say take advantage of people, but like, it's just it's playing the game theory of playing playing versus people. We're playing for money, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We need to identify our league mates. We need to, and we talked about it a little bit in like the startup episode, but knowing your league mates' tendencies is huge. Like, who's the guy that's going to overreact week one? Mm-hmm. Who's the guy that is such a homer that if somebody on his team pops, he is going to way overpay for that player because it's on his home team? Like,
he always does.
He always does. He's going to keep doing it. What guy wants to hoard all of the quarterbacks? What guy wants to, like, there are all these different archetypes that you can kind of identify in your leagues with different guys. And look, we all fall into a category to some extent of like, at the end of the day, we all have like our, like, I'm liking this term less and less because it's like being just thrown out there all the time, but like my guys, like our players that, like, for me, everyone knows I like Javonte, I like Cole Kmet, and I like Tyjae Spears. Like, it is, and DJ Dallas.
And J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah. I do like Dobbins too. All right. But I have certain players that I gravitate toward. Yeah. Somebody can take advantage of the fact that I love those players, and I might be willing to pay a hair more.
Try to take advantage of you. I sent you like Khalil Shakir trade. I tried to get you real good on that.
Yeah, you did.
On Khalil Shakir. I always try to take advantage of you with your
I'm always weary every time you send me a text or a trade.
Trade like, anytime?
Anytime you send me a trade, I'm like, I'm probably going to reject it, but let's see what it is.
Oh, the analyst leagues, dude. Because like I listen to a lot of content.
Yeah.
And I know what people are saying and who they like. So I'm like, all right, well, let's test this out. Let's,
see how much they really like them.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So identify those potential weaknesses, those potential bias, all of that kind of stuff. Look at that in your league week one, before the season starts, after the first week, early on. The quicker you can identify those things, you can be the first to market. The first to take advantage.
Guy. Don't overreact to week one, week two. Be grounded in your approach. Have a process. Analyze the data. Listen to the people you trust. If you don't have the time to actually sit down and analyze this data, but there's so many tools out there where you can find a lot of this stuff. The pace of play stuff we were talking about earlier. FTN Fantasy has a really good tool for that.
33rd teams tools are pretty
33rd team.
33rd.
33rd. No, I did not mean to say that. I love those guys.
They're great.
I mean, their tools awesome. They have great tools too. Teamrankings.com. You can look at the plays per game.
Yep.
Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. They have some really good efficiency tools, breaking down by team, how often do they drop back in neutral game scripts. That stuff's so important. So
yep.
There's so many different places you can find all this information. Be grounded, have a process, don't overreact, but pay attention and be the guy that's going to fill that need for your league mates that have a guy that goes down to injury, and just continue to churn that roster, get those assets so you can make moves down the road and put yourself in a position to win the championship.
Absolutely. Well, Jared, I think we covered everything that we wanted to cover. Any last minute things that, like, as we were talking, like, oh yeah, I forgot I wanted to say this.
No, just a couple of things, I guess, from a Dynasty Nerd standpoint, stuff we've been working on. Like, we just announced our partnership with Sleeper.
Yep.
And we are integrating the Dynasty GM inside the Sleeper app. So there will be a level of free access that you can use the tool, but you are going to want to upgrade to a membership in order to use it to its fullest extent. And with that, they have their Sleeper picks now on Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money, which is the most offered in the DFS space. So you can pick, over under Pat Mahomes passing yards, and you can pair that up with a lot of different entries on different player props and pair those all up and win 100 times your money. So use promo code NERDS, $10 first time deposit, and they're going to match it up to $100. And, that helps support Dynasty Nerds as well. So
absolutely. Well, guys, thank you for tuning into this episode. As always, you can find us all over the place, but if you wouldn't mind going to the Apple Pods platform, giving us a 5-star review, leaving a little review, little rating, that really does help a lot.
It's like kind of like a pat on the back.
It's like, hey guys, you don't suck. Yeah. Honestly, if that's all it said on there is like, hey, these guys don't suck. Like, I'm good with that. I can live with that. 5 stars. These guys don't suck. I'm good with that. So find us there, Talkin Dynasty. We will be back. We are going to do our best to make this a very regular rhythm of every other week. I know it's been a little odd starting out with the summer and the craziness of all of it, but you should be able to pretty consistently count on it every other week here moving through the fall. So with that, I think we're out of here.
Good luck. Good luck in week 1, guys.
Football.